king of German mercenaries.
Chapter 172, Get a Revolver. When Marin saw Leonardo nod, he was overjoyed and quickly took out the contract he had prepared long ago and prepared to sign it on the spot. Da Vinci was shocked when he got the contract, because Marin wrote 30 years in the contract. 30 years. Even Da Vinci couldn't guarantee that he could live to be 30 years old. In fact, this 30-year period was basically equivalent to the rest of Da Vinci's life, and he would have to work hard for Marin. So, Da Vinci hesitated. He even doubted whether Marin could hold on for 30 years. Because Marin was a military officer and would have to fight for the emperor in the future. If Marin died on the battlefield, how would Da Vinci arrange for him? In response, Marin generously expressed his willingness to add a corresponding clause to the contract, stipulating that if Marin died in battle, Da Vinci could leave freely. Of course, he could also stay and fulfill the contract, and his salary could only increase, not decrease. Having said that, Da Vinci no longer hesitated. He signed his name on the contract, and Marin signed his name as well. At this point, Da Vinci officially became a brain worker under Marin, with a service period of 30 years. Marin did not ask Da Vinci to work immediately, but let him relax for a few days. Then, the fat girl who looked like Da Vinci's teacher was left to accompany Da Vinci. A few days later, Leonardo was almost relaxed, so he came to Marin's castle and started to discuss work issues. "Oh, Ada, have you rested enough?" "Enough, enough." Da Vinci seemed to be beaming with joy. These past few days, he finally lived like a normal man. With the harmony of yin and yang, he felt refreshed. "Is the girl satisfied with the service?" "I am satisfied, but you know, she is just a prostitute, I can't marry her." "This is true. To marry a prostitute, one needs to be extremely thick-skinned and not afraid of being ridiculed. The West is not like the East, where people can marry multiple wives. Of course, some people in the East do bring prostitutes home, but they only take them as concubines. No one wants his wife to be a prostitute. For example, in the famous Du Shenyang sinks the treasure box in anger, Li Jia was initially overwhelmed by love and wanted to marry Du Shenyang. But in the end, he thought it was extremely difficult. Because, as a son of an official family, if he really wanted to marry Du Shenyang, according to the harsh patriarchal system of ancient times, Li Jia might be beaten to death. The best result would be to take her as a concubine. Therefore, under the temptation of Sun Fu, Li Jia agreed to sell Du Shenyang. It's not that Li Jia is ruthless, but he really can't bear such great pressure. If you want to marry a prostitute, you must be prepared to be beaten to death by the family law. The same is true in the West. In addition, in the West, men are only allowed to marry one wife, and there is no such thing as taking concubines. Therefore, when there is only one choice, no one is willing to marry a woman who was born a prostitute. Unless this person really can't find a wife, and doesn't care about shame. Leonardo da Vinci was a smart man, and he always was. He secretly wrote down Leonardo da Vinci's manuscripts and used mirror text to keep them secret, because he was afraid that the Vatican would know that he was doing anatomy and natural science and was against the Vatican. Therefore, it is unlikely that such a smart man would marry a prostitute on a whim. Moreover, Leonardo da Vinci regarded this fat prostitute as the shadow of Sister Henia. "Yes, I will send someone to Italy to find you a well-educated lady in a while. By the way, what are your requirements? For example, in terms of appearance, do you like fat or thin? Tall or short? There's no rush. I'll tell you when I've thought it over." "My boss, tell me, what should I do now? I think you spent so much money and even kidnapped me in person, you wouldn't keep me for nothing, right? Of course, I asked you to come here because I hope you can help me do something big." I like this statement. I, Leonardo da Vinci, was born to be a person who likes to do great things. Ada, have you ever heard of clockwork? Clockwork? Of course I know. Now many famous craftsmen are trying to use clocks and watches with clockwork. I have seen it many times in Italy and I am very familiar with some clockwork craftsmen. You can make clockwork yourself? No, but I have worked with craftsmen who can make clockworks, and I have also bought clockworks. Then do you know where there is a master craftsman who makes clockwork? There are several in Milan, and there are also some in Florence. Great, write me a list and I'll send someone to recruit. What do you want to do with the clockwork? 2 uses, one is to make more accurate clocks. To be more precise, Marin wanted to make a marine clock. The current clocks have too much error, and it is difficult to calculate longitude and determine coordinates during voyages. Therefore, Marin needs a more accurate marine clock, that is, a more accurate clock. Although I am also involved in watches, I am not the top watchmaker because I am not dedicated to studying this. However, I know a watchmaker. His name is Miller, and he is a famous watchmaker in Milan. A famous watchmaker? Can I hire him? You can knock out the one who brought. Okay, that makes sense. What's the other use? To make a firing mechanism for a musket. What? Use a clockwork to fire a musket? What a bold idea. What is the specific principle? Leonardo da Vinci was an inventor and was very interested in new inventions. It's to use the spring to accumulate energy first, then use the trigger to loosen the wound spring, let the steel wheel driven by the spring rub against the flint and ignite the gunpowder. What a genius idea. Leonardo da Vinci had worked as a military contractor and knew a lot about weapons. He thought about it and found that this idea was really good, so he exclaimed in praise. What a pity, I don't understand the manufacturing process. I heard that you are good at this, so I asked you to develop this. I can't do it alone because I'm not good at making clockwork. So, I need a few craftsmen who are proficient in making clockwork to help me make the clockwork. That's no problem. I'll send people to Italy to recruit them right away. However, those craftsmen can help you make the springs, but for the spring-fired revolver guns, don't let those hired craftsmen participate in the research and development and manufacturing. You want to keep the secret to yourself? Yes, with a revolver musket that doesn't require a matchlock, I can equip my cavalry with it. In this way, my cavalry will not only have impact power, but also long-range attack power. Excuse me for being blunt, but it's very difficult for cavalrymen to aim while on horseback. Moreover, cavalrymen are unlikely to use long-barreled muskets, only pistols. Such muskets have a shorter range. You are right. Although the effective range of the cavalry's musket may be within 30 yards, that is not the most important thing. I can equip the light cavalry with this kind of musket to fight against the plate knights. My light cavalry can use muskets to attack the plate knights at a certain distance, and the plate knights are unlikely to catch up with my light cavalry, and they can't escape. But a musket can only be fired once. It's very troublesome to reload it after firing. Of course I know that, but I can have my cavalry carry 5 or 6 revolver muskets. Is that possible? However, a revolver flintlock that uses a clockwork is very expensive to manufacture, right? You know, such precision devices require a lot of time and high-quality materials. Therefore, a revolver flintlock is probably going to be quite expensive. I know, but I don't plan to equip too many of these cavalry. Moreover, this kind of cavalry is specially used to deal with the enemy's plate knights. We don't need too many people, just a large scale. What you said makes sense. Such an army is indeed the nemesis of the slow-running plate knights. Of course, I am a war genius. Marin said, flattering himself. In fact, this type of soldier was indeed rampant in the 16th century. Its title was Black Knights, and it was an important type of soldier in Germany. The Black Knights under Charles V once defeated the French plate-armored knights with their revolver muskets. However, this is only suitable for attacking the plate armor knights that were popular in this era, and the phalanx of spear infantry without long-range firepower. When Europeans abandoned the bulky plate armor knights, the black-shirt knights were easily bitten and chased by the enemy's light cavalry. After the 17th century, most infantry used long-barreled muskets. The short guns used by the black-shirt knights had a range that was completely incomparable to the long-barreled models of the infantry, and shooting at each other would only lead to death. Therefore, the black-shirt knights gradually disappeared in the late 16th century. However, the sister branch of the black-shirt knights, the dragoons, became popular and became an important mobile firepower branch. In this way, Leonardo da Vinci took on 2 engineering projects at once, a clockwork clock and a clockwork revolver flint gun. Among them, Marin said that the clockwork clock could be developed later, but the clockwork revolver flint gun needed to be developed as soon as possible and kept secret. Moreover, the difficulty of using a revolver flintlock is much easier than that of a clockwork clock. After all, clockwork clocks require very high precision. On the other hand, a revolver flintlock only needs to produce sparks through friction to ignite the gunpowder. Therefore, the difficulty of the two is not on the same level. The only drawback is that the gun is very expensive because it uses a complex clockwork. But this is also the technical barrier that Marin set for those poor nobles. It's not that you can't make it, but that you can't afford it because the cost is too high. To be honest, Marin could have asked Da Vinci to develop a flintlock rifle. Moreover, the cost of a flintlock rifle is much lower, which is convenient for large-scale deployment. However, the flintlock rifle is easy to imitate. If Marin's opponents were equipped with flintlock rifles on a large scale, then Marin would have dug a hole to bury himself. Therefore, Marin, who was not short of money, decided to first develop a revolver that only the rich could afford, so that those poor monarchs could not afford it even if they learned the technology. You know, the black shirt knights that Marin was planning to prepare each carried several revolver rifles. If there were no strong financial resources, ordinary lords could not afford to equip them. Chapter 173 New Weights and Measures. Leonardo da Vinci was very serious when he was working. As one of the most outstanding mechanical engineers of the time, he was also very proficient in mechanical manufacturing. Although Leonardo da Vinci was not very proficient in the manufacture of clockwork, it did not mean that he did not know how to do it. With Marin watching, Leonardo da Vinci demonstrated how to build gears and clockwork, but what surprised Marin was that Leonardo da Vinci made the gears and springs entirely by hand. Nonsense, where could he find a machine tool, and he did not use any high-precision measuring instruments. For example, when making gears, Leonardo da Vinci first calculated the size, then roughly measured it, made the mold, and cast the steel billet. Then, he took the billet and began to grind it by hand. After grinding for a while, he took out a standard reference object for real object comparison. After the comparison, if there is no problem, it will be put into use directly. If there is a problem, continue to grind. If it is overground and smaller than the standard reference size, it will be scrapped directly. Marin looked a little stunned. Ada, didn't you calculate the size in advance? Why did you keep grinding it? What's the point of calculating it? The error is still too big. Then, through Leonardo da Vinci's explanation, Marin learned that in this era, the smallest unit of length in Europe was actually an inch. Moreover, there is no modern vernier caliper in Europe at present, and only the UK has a ruler similar to the vernier caliper, the caliper. Of course, this caliper has no precise scale, so the measurement is not very reliable. In theory, manufacturing gears and springs should be considered very precise devices, requiring very precise specifications and scales. However, in this era, when people manufacture precision parts, the unit that can be accurate is only an estimate of about 1/10 of an inch, and the accuracy cannot reach 1 millimeter. Therefore, when Marin watched Leonardo da Vinci making gears and springs, he often saw Leonardo da Vinci rework and grind them again. Because, although the previous calculations were not bad, due to large measurement errors, parts often did not match and needed to be regrinded. Once the grinding was overdone, the parts had to be scrapped. In this era, the difference between a master craftsman and an apprentice lies in their grinding skills, in addition to their knowledge. For example, a master craftsman has better skills in grinding parts. When it comes to the stage of approaching the scale, he will be very careful, so that there are few parts that are scrapped and the yield rate is high. However, those apprentices often fail to control well at the critical moment, and the parts will be scrapped. Even if they are not scrapped, the parts will not fit well because of poor manual control. Moreover, it is very difficult to check the quality of workpieces in this era. You need to take out a standard workpiece and compare it carefully against the sunlight, which is very demanding on your eyesight. Unlike later times, the dimensions of parts are fixed, and the quality inspectors can see the error by measuring with a vernier caliper. Then they can check the table to see if it is within the allowable error range, and then judge whether the workpiece is qualified. It would be nice to have a vernier caliper. Marin exclaimed. However, before making the vernier caliper, Marin had to figure out the weights and measures first. Because there was no centimeter or millimeter measurement in this era, Marin had to define it himself. Moreover, the vernier caliper was made very precisely, and the lowest scale of an ordinary vernier caliper reached 0.1 millimeter. Basically, a vernier caliper of 0.1 millimeter was absolutely sufficient in this era. Even at the industrial level of the 19th century, this scale was sufficient. However, since there were no scales for meters, decimeters, centimeters, and millimeters, Marin first needed to create such a scale himself. But for European measurements, Marin is most familiar with the imperial system. For example, 1 inch equals 2.54 centimeters for length, and 1 imperial pound equals 453.59 grams for weight. Therefore, if you want to infer how long a standard centimeter is, you just need to figure out how long a standard inch is. Then, according to the principle that 1 inch equals 2.54 centimeters, you can quickly figure out how long 1 centimeter is. Then, every tenth of a centimeter is 1 millimeter. At the same time, 1 standard imperial pound is equal to 453.59 grams. Therefore, as long as you get the weight of 1 standard imperial pound, generally all countries have copper weights as standard weight references, you can infer that 1 gram is a variety of. To this end, Marin arranged for people to go to Britain and find ways to contact the British court. He obtained the data of standard feet, inches, and imperial pounds and brought them back to Denberg. Then, under Leonardo da Vinci's astonished gaze, Marin deduced the lengths of 1 centimeter, 1 decimeter, 1 meter and 1 millimeter. Then, using the imperial pound, he deduced the weights of grams and kilograms. Afterwards, Marin arranged for craftsmen to make standard reference copper rulers of 1 meter and 1 decimeter, and standard copper weights of 50 grams, 500 grams and 1000 grams, as standard references for weight. After the reference objects were made, these standard objects were sealed and wrapped in paper. They were only taken out for comparison and use when needed. After determining the measurement, Marin began to ask Leonardo da Vinci to help him build a vernier caliper. Then, under Marin's theoretical guidance, Leonardo da Vinci, who had good craftsmanship, built a very standard copper vernier caliper, and the scale used was also accurate to 1 millimeter. Although it did not reach 0.1 millimeter, it was also sufficient. Because in the era of handmade devices, 1 millimeter was already a very precise scale. As for that little error, experienced craftsmen can actually feel it themselves. With the vernier caliper, Leonardo da Vinci made it much easier to make gears and springs. For example, when casting gears, he no longer needed to take out standard reference objects, but could directly make molds according to standard dimensions and then start casting. Marin also told Leonardo da Vinci that the vernier caliper can actually be accurate to 0.1 millimeter, but due to the level of manufacturing technology, it is difficult to make a vernier caliper with an accuracy of 0.1 millimeter. Of course, with Leonardo da Vinci's craftsmanship, if he spent more time and scrapped a few more calipers, he could also make a vernier caliper with an accuracy of 0.1 millimeter. Hearing what Marin said, Leonardo da Vinci also became interested. So he put aside other matters and concentrated on making vernier calipers. Finally, after scrapping dozens of them, he made 3 relatively standard copper vernier calipers. With such a high-precision vernier caliper, Leonardo da Vinci himself felt that it was much easier to make gears and spring steel wheels. In the past, Leonardo da Vinci had to take out the real objects for repeated comparison to determine whether the quality of gears and springs was up to standard. But now, if he wanted to know whether the size was standard, he just needed to take out the vernier caliper and measure it, and it would be easy to do. In this way, Leonardo da Vinci, who was not good at making springs, also made a spring with a very standard appearance. Of course, it is only the appearance that is standard. As for the quality, da Vinci admitted that the standard spring steel wheel is made of refined steel repeatedly forged by excellent blacksmiths. The steel wheel da Vinci made was simply made of wrought iron provided by Marin. Although the size is very standard, the internal stress is not right and needs to be adjusted. However, for Marin, a time traveler, he knew that the best spring steel for the clockwork steel wheel was the one with the best elasticity. The simplest spring steel was actually a type of tool steel, high-carbon steel. The steel bars that were repeatedly forged were actually made by blacksmiths repeatedly heating and forging, which reduced the carbon content of the pig iron and turned it into high-carbon steel. Therefore, Marin knew that for the steel bars that seemed difficult to process in the Middle Ages, they were actually easy to manufacture. All he had to do was ensure that the carbon content of the steel was maintained at 0.620. The lowest carbon content among high-carbon steels, close to the level of medium-carbon steel, and add some manganese, the content was around 1%, specifically 0.91. 20%, but in actual control, it was not that precise. As long as it was almost the same, it could be used, and then, after a simple heat treatment, he would get the lowest grade spring steel in later generations, 65 Mn steel. With 65 Mn steel, the quality is much better than the steel bars that are repeatedly forged by current blacksmiths using pig iron bars. Moreover, because it does not require so much manpower to repeatedly forge and process, the cost and working hours can be greatly reduced. In fact, many ancient Chinese steel knives were made through a similar, 100 hammering and 100 tempering method, where a piece of pig iron was repeatedly heated and forged to reduce and consume its internal carbon content, and finally steel was obtained, also known as 100 refined steel. The so-called refined iron was actually obtained in this way. However, through scientific methods, Marin can directly make steel from pig iron or wrought iron, which saves the step of repeated forging. Not only does it save labor time, but it can also greatly reduce costs. Moreover, the quality of the two is similar. Of course, it would take some time for Marin to produce qualified 65 Mn steel, and he would also need the help of some craftsmen. However, with the technical guidance of Marin, the time traveler, it was only a matter of time before 65 Mn steel was produced. Once 65 Mn steel is developed, the production of springs will no longer require blacksmiths to repeatedly heat and forge pig iron bars, spending a lot of energy and fuel to process them into steel bars. At that time, the production costs of spring steel wheels, chains and springs can be greatly reduced. If the production cost of these parts is reduced, then the production cost of the originally expensive revolver flintlock gun can be reduced a lot, which will greatly facilitate the mass production and installation of revolver flintlock guns. Because of the improvement of weights and measures and the emergence of vernier calipers, Leonardo da Vinci found that processing clockwork steel wheels, chains, and springs was much easier. As long as the size and location of the parts with the best properties are remembered and the parts are measured with a vernier caliper, it can be accurately determined whether the parts are qualified. Then, according to the standard requirements, the craftsman can make slight adjustments and processing. In this way, the production of precision parts is much more convenient. The only problem is that Da Vinci seems to be a little uncomfortable with the new measurement system. Even if he measures the value, he always unconsciously converts it to the old size in his mind. However, Marin believes that the standard decimal measurement system popular in later generations is much more convenient than the old measurement system, both in terms of calculation and memory. As long as you use it for a long time, you will feel that it is more convenient and practical than the old measurement system.